It is Friday, and I am not going to do any more research. I'm not going to talk to any more authors. I am going to talk to a smart person, but I'm not going to fully intellectually engage him. I'm only going to discuss funny headlines with him. Hello, Justin Robert Young.
Oh man, this is great. I enjoy being here on the Friday release valve because it's always when you have funny people on, and I like to pretend that I'm funny sometimes.
You don't have to be remotely insightful at all. We just have to piece our way through some of the better headlines. Now, first of all, as I look out the window right now, which I have draped a blanket over, it is 10 degrees outside, and it was negative 10 when I woke up. So it's very cold. I assume that it is also 10 degrees in Los Angeles, or excuse me, 10 degrees in Oakland.
It is not 10 degrees in Oakland. It is indeed a balmy 55, which is still too cold for me personally as a Floridian. But no, I was lucky enough. I was in Austin about 48 hours before things got really, really, really cold. It was already sleeting and icing over there. But I got out in just the nick of time, right after buying a house, and then
Nice.
watching to see whether or not my new home is out on the power grid. Which the good news is, it is a sturdy enough power grid that so far my home has not lost power. Although I have not technically bought it yet.
Well, that's also good. So if like all of the pipes burst, you're probably going to be all right. Good. The Arctic blast has confirmed to me what I already suspected, which is I am a hardcore cold weather guy and a very anti-hot weather guy. Yesterday I went out, it was 2 degrees. We were 1 degree away from not even being in the plurals anymore. Like we were 1 degree away from going, how cold is it outside? It's one outside. That's where we were. And I walked outside and was like, it's nippy. I mean, it's cold, but I'm fine.
This is why me and you cannot have any kind of if me and you.
We can't get married. If it doesn't work out with Ashley, we're not going to shack up. It's just not going to work.
I mean, I was going to say Bert and Ernie or Felix and Oscar, but I mean, if you want to take this relationship to the next level, Andrew, then I can take that under advisement. But no, I'm the exact opposite. I would prefer it to be in the mid 80s, and when it gets up to the 90s and triple digits, I'm like, you want to know, maybe I should switch out the flip flops so they don't get too stinky every once in a while. But I'm far more comfortable in that.
I'm the exact inverse of that. Like when I read stories about it hit 120 in Australia, I'm like, I don't even want to live on that planet. Whatever planet has 120 degrees Fahrenheit is not one I want to be on. I want to deal with.
You also are you have too many top coats.
Even when here's the thing though. I can put on as much tweed as I need to. I can put on 3 or 4 layers of tweed and then I'm fine. You know what I can't do? Walk around naked. Eventually I get in trouble. There's only so much clothing you could take off before you're just a sweaty naked person.
Oh, this is the same kind of propaganda I often hear from your and I would say that to that, number one, you definitely can just walk around naked. There are plenty of places in which you can do that. And number two, everywhere that's hot has central air conditioning. It's fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, we can't. The Bert and Ernie thing will have to be in spurts.
No, we're gonna have to find that one place that has the exact right temperature where we're both upset. That would be the only place we could live.
Colorado, maybe. I don't know. Where it's just a little too warm for me, a little too cold for you. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But I will kick it to our first headline of the week. 80-year-old Paperboy postpones retirement after switching to an e-bike. The man in question is George Bailey. He's 80 years old. He thinks he's going to keep being a paperboy until he's 90. He is the United Kingdom's oldest paperboy. He lives in Headcorn, Kent, and has been a paperboy now for 50 years, all through the weather of the last half century, through the coronavirus pandemic, and was going to retire. And then somebody gave him an e-bike, which is allowing him to buy that much more time to deliver the newspapers to his town in Kent. And I read about this guy and I was like, what a loser. How do you stay a paperboy for 50 years? Like you're having to work to not get a promotion. 50 years, you should own the newspaper, George. Like you should be running the show by now. How are you doing this for 50 years without moving on to another role of the corporate hierarchy?
I mean, also, when I was a child, the paper delivery people were in vans.
Right.
Like, a buddy of mine, his parents used to deliver the Herald, and it was just like he would have to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, but they'd get into a van and they'd throw this stuff out. What loser is on his bike? Who's still on his? I mean, aside from the fact that, like, is there still a thriving enough print paper industry to justify this?
He might be because I was born too late to be a paper boy. Even if I'd wanted to do it, you couldn't, like, they didn't exist anymore. If you wanted to be a paper boy, you were a 37-year-old person with a car that woke up and drove it around. Like no one woke up before school on a bike and threw it. So this might very well be the very last paper boy. Like this, he might have actually been a paper boy that just kept doing it up until age 80.
He might have been the last paper boy in 85. And it just so happens that he's continued to keep that up. Although, by the way, it does reveal, the more you think about it, it does reveal troubling practices in the print industry, that that it was ever okay that businesses big and small would buy advertisement in this gathering place for the city or town's ideas, and then it would be entrusted to some snot-nosed ragamuffin aged 10 to 16. Basically it's one step above the child minors in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
When I was a tour guide in Edinburgh, I was friends with an English guy who was my age named Matt. And Matt had been a paper boy in his neighborhood for a weekly periodical. And what he had done, this is relayed to me from when he was in high school, what he had done is he would deliver half of the newspapers once a week to half of the town and then just throw away the other half in a dumpster. And then the following week, he would repeat the process for the other half. And neither half of town, it being a weekly newspaper, ever realized what was happening. They just assumed it was every 2 weeks, and he cut his labor in half and got paid for it. So that's the kind of work ethic you get with paper boys.
This is something that has dogged the newspaper industry. This is not a joke. This is a scandal for decades and decades, as they prop up their circulation by destroying papers. What if this moron was the unwilling dupe that they're not, because they know he's just gonna, they can tear up a bunch of papers, and then when they're like, hey, you have a massive circulation fraud, Kent on Worthington, whatever their stupid town is called, and it's like, oh, sorry, it's just old Jerry. What was his name? It was
George Bailey.
George Bailey, right? That's from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, from It's a Wonderful Life. Yeah.
This is not even real.
You're right. This is
a circulation scam.
It's probably, is this from one of those British newspapers that's just an excuse to sell advertising through side boobs? Like, I'm going to have to check the source on this. If it's anything with the word express in it, what is it? Cyclingweekly.com, which is at least a step up above, the Daily Mail. All the same, though, I think we're going to agree it's probably fake. We'll move on. So back to America, a land known for trustworthy news consistently. Indeed. Kid cop who impersonated officer as a 14-year-old charged again as a grown man for doing the same thing. A man in Illinois has been charged with impersonating a Chicago police sergeant on 3 dates this year, according to cops in a statement obtained by Law and Crime. His name is Vincent Richardson. He's 26 and is now charged with 3 counts of false impersonation of a peace officer. Not the first time he did it, as previously mentioned. I did a little bit of scrounging on this. In 2009, he convinced Chicago cops he was one of their own and managed to get sent on a shift with the Chicago PD, and he was in 8th grade at the time. Then in 2013, as a 19-year-old, he was charged with pretending to be an officer in order to buy police equipment from a uniform store. And then again in 2015, when he was 21, authorities said that he was caught wearing a bulletproof vest and a police duty belt and had a BB gun and a stun gun. And what got him this time is that he pulled a car over at a traffic stop and issued a citation or something to that effect. I think he pulled the guy over for speeding or something. And then one of the cops realized, hey, wait a minute, that's just some guy. It's just a guy with a belt. And I got him arrested. Here's what I'm thinking. Clearly this guy wants to be a police officer. He doesn't, weirdly, he doesn't seem to have abused any of this. He didn't try to trick anybody to having sex with him. He didn't beat anybody up with a nightclub. What the Chicago police should do is deputize him and get free labor. That's what I would do. Is I would go, do you want to be a deputy police officer? Great. There you go. Go do my job now. By the way, we're not going to pay you. This is a volunteer position. You're welcome, Chicago.
I feel like he could be a mascot. Like he could just be
nice.
come up with like old Teddy Citizen, and he's not a cop, but boy does he want to be, and that's our mascot. And he shows up to the softball league, and he's there for the policeman's ball and everything, and he's just kind of like I mean, this guy, another one, just a very curious way of looking at the world, because he, on one hand, at first blush, you think he's kind of Frank Abagnale, right? Like that he's Catch Me If You Can, but like Frank Abagnale did that stuff so he could fly across the country for free and get money,
get laid and get money. Yeah, that was what Frank Abagnale was about. This guy seems to just really want to be a cop.
Yeah, well, because you're right, because even if he's getting laid because of it, it's consensual, because otherwise there'd be a different headline. Like the greatest crime would be something more than just impersonating a police officer. That would be in the second graph. So I would say, mascot, and also have some higher ambitions. But both these people, well, I'm sentencing both of you to dream bigger.
I think it would be funny if at his court trial, it turned out that the judge was also faking being a judge and was just some guy that really wanted to be a judge. And then the attorneys came clear and they're like, I've never taken the bar. I just really enjoyed night court. So I've been doing this. And it turns out like the whole system is just filled with posers.
All for one, like paralegal. And like she's been really trying hard. And
she's taking night classes. She's got 3 kids.
God. This is all an elaborate way to prove that her fraud complex is overwrought. Like this is, it's like now she finally realized, oh no, I do belong. Look at all the freak shows and total fraudsters surround me on a daily basis.
To go back to the earlier bio point here, convincing a police department to send him on a shift in a squad car with a partner when you're in 8th grade, I have to say is deeply impressive to me. 8th grade, and you're able to go on a squad car and have a partner? Like 8th grade, how old? You're like 15, 16, 8th grade? That's impressive.
So here's number one. Have you ever seen pictures of The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, as a teenager? Because you will see a teenager around this age that very much looked like somebody who should be in a squad car with a partner. He had a mustache and just looked like an extra from Miami Vice. If he's not that, and by that I mean the literal Dwayne The Rock Johnson, in physical type, he's got to be a bigger guy, right? Because that's the only other way that you look older, is if you're a thicker gentleman. You're either very muscular or you're thicker. That usually are the telltale physical indications that you are older than you might look, or than you actually are, right?
Well, and I think there's a mustache thing going on too, right? Because like if you're like black guys can pull off a mustache very early on. Like I'm very jealous. I can't. If I grow a mustache right now at age 37, I look like I'm going to a cosplay convention, or I am in a community theater production where I'm some kind of French dueler. It doesn't look right.
Yeah.
But if I had short hair and I had a short mustache and I were thicker, you'd go, okay, he's a cop or he's a police officer, or he's a cop or he's a firefighter. That's the only reason a white guy under 50 with no jowls that looks like me would ever have a mustache. But my guess is he had a very accurate mustache and a very accurate haircut where people were like, oh, clearly he is a cop.
Yeah, but even then, there's a certain element of musculature. It's like the reason why you always know that it's total garbage whenever there's like a teen movie or a television show. It's not because they act different or even the faces really are all that different. It's just that, like, most actual kids just look like sort of weird unfilled balloons, like just these wobbly things that are just kind of like, flitting about, where like actors or people that we would find conventionally sort of like attractive have like an element, like they look like one of those posing things that your art major friend would have. Like there's a rigidness, unless you're thicker, and I'm saying that so I don't say fat, but like then you're just like, oh, okay, well, they're fat teenagers, there's fat adults. That doesn't change significantly between the ages of 15 and 45.
I would never have pulled that off. In addition to not being able to pull off a mustache, I weighed, without any variation at all, I weighed exactly 136 pounds all 4 years of high school. It just, I gained my height.
No matter what you ate, no matter what you ate, literally, how many Mountain Dews.
It never, every single time I was weighed, every single time in high school, it was always 136 pounds without exception. And I now weigh more than, I'm still pretty trim, but like 136 pounds for a guy that's 6 feet tall is not a lot. So I basically looked like a hat rack impersonating a substitute teacher all 4 years of high school. I would not have been able to pull off cop.
I would imagine that, you looked like a radio antenna getting hit by strong winds. Like, because it wasn't rigid. I'm sure you had a bit of a hunch one way or another.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It was, man, I'm looking better and better the older I get, which thank God for that. On the note of where I'm from, with few options, Cannabis Lounge becomes Oklahoma town's only shelter for the homeless during deep freeze. So this is right now. Sometimes we record these episodes 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Kind of depends on the schedule, but this is going to come out the week that we're recording it. There is an Arctic blast that is hurtling through the country, and I don't want to point fingers here, but clearly Minnesota didn't do its job and become a speed bump for everything coming down from Canada. So now it's hitting all of the honest people south of you people in Minnesota who weren't able to erect barriers like you're supposed to, and it's hitting all of us in the middle of the country. And this particular town, of which I am eminently familiar with, it turned up in my in my research, Wagner, Oklahoma, where I have been the last 2 weeks. Their homeless shelter is a Cannabis Lounge. Well done, Wagner.
Wow. So now, for those who are not following this, Oklahoma has become kind of the nation's model for how to legalize cannabis, like at least with certain advocates. It hasn't over-regulated it. It is very entrepreneur friendly. If you want to just move somewhere and get into the weed game, like, Oklahoma makes it very easy. I only imagine where their like civic pride is, because there's just more of these out there that they want to welcome people in. I guess really the hacky thing is, like, do they have giveaways? Like, I don't know. I would imagine it to just be very wholesome.
It is. So the only, and right now I'm staying with my parents in Edmond, Oklahoma, because I didn't want to be trapped in the cabin in the event that electricity went off. But I had been there. So the only person that I spoke to for 2 weeks prior to coming down here was the next door neighbor at our cabin, Mark, who's a very nice guy, maybe mid 60s. And Mark came over the other day. I had a little fire going on the back porch, and he came over and was like, "Hey, just wanted to check on you. You doing okay?" And I went, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he's like, "Well, hey, I know that you podcast. So, and the internet's not great around here. So if the internet goes down, I leave the back door open. You just walk right in. You can use the bathroom. You can use my internet. That's fine. I've got a lot of wood on the back porch. That's yours if you want it." And I was like, "Thanks, Mark." And he's like, "Yep, got a lot of tools. I know you're not up here a lot, but if you need like any tools, I probably got them. You just swing by." And I went, "Great." And he goes, "Now, do you like marijuana?" And I went, I'm not, I've tried it. I'm just not super into it. And he's like, "Well, I am a grower and I do own a dispensary. So if you need a hookup, let me know and we'll get you hooked up." And I was like, "Great."
Yeah, that's not this guy, is it? Is it this guy?
No, I checked. No, because this is a mother and a daughter that own this particular dispensary. So it's not my neighbor Mark's place, I don't think. Although, like, it's so surreal though, because Oklahoma is the holster of the Bible Belt. It's an incredibly conservative part of the country, but it has this weird juxtaposition of loving marijuana, but being extremely earthy, folksy, agrarian, rural at the same time, in a way that I never would have predicted would have happened.
Yeah, I think that any lingering Okie from Muskogee level conservatism probably kind of dissolved into the idea that a massive cash crop was available to anybody.
It's conservative, but it's conservative, but it's not opposed to profit. I also suspect in retrospect that a lot of the people that were like, "We should hang drug dealers," were going home and smoking pot. That's my guess in retrospect, is that there might have been a lot more pot activity than we hitherto had anticipated.
which really kind of breaks down the drug war in a very silly kind of way. That what we really wanted was more courtly law. Like drugs would be fine. You could buy coke on the street if somebody was just like, "Good day, good sir," and good day to you.
As long as they're charming and they're like, now what a hell of a dog. That's what is that? That looks like about half Labrador. That's great. Now, do you like heroin? I've got some heroin. If you, it's I find just a little bit allows me to sleep pretty well. You don't want to overdo it because you'll die, but you take a little bit. You watch Matlock. You just have a fine evening. You wake up ready to do your job the following day. Like that. Yeah, that might be the problem.
That I'll tell you what. If drug reformers actually cared, if they were actually there to end the war on drugs, they should have been pitching, the mainstream media would lead you to believe that cocaine is bad for you. But I am here to say that indeed it kept me up all night making sure I could write this monologue for you.
Yeah, well, hats off to Wagner, Oklahoma. Incidentally, so I found in the course of researching this, I'm kicking myself. I missed out on this. The Wagner Community Center, the last thing they did before the Arctic blast hit was to invite a traveling ventriloquist to come to the town and do a ventriloquist act. And I was like, this is great. It's like a time capsule from the 50s where it's like, we're all going to go to the local town community center to watch a guy in a wooden dummy do possibly racist jokes. And,
oh my God.
I'm sad I missed out on that.
I mean, Oklahoma rapidly becoming one of the coolest states in the union, where you and a bunch of your new homeless friends can do grab bong hits and then watch some dude do archaic vaudevillian ventriloquist act.
It's a Norman Rockwell painting with a lot of THC. A lot to be commended on that. And we'll kick off our final headline comes to us from our friends in France. The nation of France now allows workers to eat lunch at their desks without breaking the law. Allow me to unpack that.
Go ahead.
COVID is affecting everybody. That includes France, making it more difficult to eat at restaurants, certainly to be able to sit down in a restaurant and eat. Now, the problem here is that it is literally against the law in the nation of France to eat lunch at your desk if you're an employee. It is built in to the national governmental structure of the Fifth Republic of France that you have not only the right to have a lunch break, which includes 2 to 3 courses and a glass of wine, I assume, but you literally legally cannot sit at your desk to eat it because there is a fear that evil capitalist businessmen might compel their workers to work through meals. And now they're allowing them to do this. And I literally crunched the numbers on this. I went through 30 years of French unemployment data. They have an average of 9.45% over the last 30 years. Well done, France. I wonder if some of your weird labor laws have contributed to this. Maybe.
Wow.
Anybody unfamiliar, by the way, 9.45% is high for unemployment. You want to have it at 2%.
Yeah, no, if you're at 2%, you're usually getting reelected. Obviously this last cycle was a little bit different because we had some COVID related noise to the signal, but wow, I don't know. I love eating food at my desk. Back when I actually had a job where people would care where I ate instead of working for myself. But my problem was never about working through lunch. My problem was them letting me get the hell out of there early. I always wanted to get in early and just work as hard as I could throughout the day. I just wanted to leave early.
Yeah, that was, when I worked in cable television news, first, if I had been required to take an hour-long lunch break, it would have stressed me out because there was just no way to do it. Like you're on a deadline. I could not have taken an hour off. I would have come back and been so stressed. There was a year of my life where my lunch consisted of running downstairs, shooting myself in the face with a salad, and then running back upstairs. And there really was unavoidable. But I'm with you, though. At the end of the day, when we'd prepared for the following day, there's only so much you can do in a 24-hour news cycle before you're done until the following morning. You can't prepare anymore. And I always thought it was really stupid that we would just sit at our desks for an hour and a half on Facebook and thought, let us go home. We're all tired. We've worked hard throughout. There was literally no time we could have slacked off. It would have been impossible. Let us go.
The last desk job that I had before I went to go work with a friend of mine, that was a whole different, can of worms. But the last desk job that I had, I made my decision I was never going to work for another person again when they banned the internet.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, hey, and I was writing a blog on the side and everything, and I'm like, hey, quick question. You guys like how hard I work, right? Because I come in early, I stay late, I'm banging through everything that they need. And they're like, yeah, love it. I'm like, so can I have my internet back, because I am doing everything that you ask for me to do, and that's the thing. It's like, no, because it would set a bad example. And I'm like, but if you were so convinced with examples, then everybody else seeing me work really hard would make them want to work really hard, and that's not happening. So clearly, that's not an issue. You just let me do stuff on the internet, and they were like, no, and I'm like, okay, well, I feel like this is not for me anymore.
Yeah.
I just need to leave. I like the internet too much.
I had a moment where, very frequently when you're working in news, as you and I both know, stuff happens that's not scheduled, and
Yeah.
you might have to deal with it, right? And that would sometimes happen where, let's say there was a story that was developing. It's a Friday, and we knew that there was a chance we were going to have to come in on Saturday or Sunday to cover it, which is part of our job. That's fine.
Happens. Yeah.
One time my boss went, hey, check your email periodically throughout the weekend in case you need to come in. And I went, I'm not going to do that. And he went, what? And I went, you can call me at any time. You can call me and I'll come in, but I'm not going to spend my weekend checking my email every 20 minutes, because then I don't get to have a weekend. And this is a bad precedent. So if you want to call me, I will absolutely come in and be chipper and do this, but I'm not going to check my email. So I'm just letting you know, if you want to get a hold of me, call me and I'll come, but don't email me. And they never did. And it worked out fine. And it was the only time I've ever drawn a line with labor and management that I was like, good call, me.
I think that's fair. That is very, very fair. You should have to shine the bat signal if you want to scramble the jets here on this one, bucko.
So real quick, one I've been to France twice, and I recall one time trying to go to a restaurant and being unable to, because all of the people at the restaurant were out to lunch. And that, to me, is the essence of French labor law, is that you may not be able to eat at a restaurant because the people who run the restaurant are eating lunch at another restaurant.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that. I've never been to France myself, but I have recently been to Italy, which I obviously, with its neighbor to the south, I feel like shares a lot of the culture of France, except for the fact that I feel like France does eventually get around to putting in crazy laws, where Italy, I think, would like to, but then they get too distracted yelling at each other and snorting espresso or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Those seem a little. I love Europe's great, but
great
they
fun.
love rules.
They love rules. It's very. I gotta say,
never met rules that
it's super difficult to fire people in France, which might be part of the reason they've got a 9.45% unemployment rate over 30 years, because no one wants to hire anybody if they know they can't fire them. So if you're the king of France or the prime number or whatever you have, and you would like to call me, I have a lot of ideas. There's all sorts of stuff that you're doing fantastic that we should model in America, but I don't think labor laws are one of them. Anyway, I gotta duck out.
Yeah. All right, I'll do this very, very quickly because I know you got to get out of here. Best and worst of European culture. We're in Italy. My wife has a medical thing with her ear. She needs to get it checked out. Turns out Italy's got a free healthcare thing. She goes to a hospital. She gets checked out. She gets a prescription. She gets it filled. To pay for it, we have to go, no lie, to the post office to pay for or to pay for whatever. It was free, but it was some nominal fee, blah, blah, blah. We wait in line at the post office, eventually get called. The guy there is watching porn on his phone, and we know that because he has to put it down because we don't have the right form. So he calls the hospital, and he's like, yeah, you didn't write the right form. The hospital's like, we didn't have any. And he's like, huh? I just kind of went back to watching porn, and we walked away. And that's how I imagine all of European medicine is. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Hey, Justin, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. Justin is the host of Politics, a friend and podcasting ally of mine, and I bid everyone a good weekend. Goodbye.
See ya.
All right, I got to run. Goodbye.
Bye.
That's the show. Thanks for listening. Thank you, media assistant Eric Stipe, who edited today's program. And thank you, glorious elite orphans who sponsor this program through Patreon and make the whole shebang possible. You can join them by going to patreon.com/Andrew Heaton. Until next time, I've been Andrew Heaton, and so have you.